The galaxy has always known war. From the birth of the stars to the death of empires, blood has been its language, and despair its only constant. Yet in this endless cycle of slaughter and faith, of demon and machine, something moves that was never meant to exist here. Beyond the warp storms, beyond even the Emperor's sight, a ripple travels through the fabric of time itself. It is not psychic, it is not divine. It is older, colder, a wound in reality that hums with hunger. At first, it is only a whisper carried through the immaterium, faint, broken, and strange. But as it spreads, it becomes a name, one long forgotten by every timeline and erased from every archive. A name that once terrified gods and devoured kings, Raziel. The devourer of souls, the wraith who once walked between life and death, now stirs again. His presence slides through the cracks of the universe like smoke through glass, unseen yet felt by every living thing with a soul to lose. The warp flickers in confusion. The chaos gods pause in their eternal conflict, sensing something that is not of their realm, a hunger that consumes even what they claim. The Astronomicon dims for a heartbeat, and the Emperor's own golden light shivers upon the throne. Across 10,000 worlds, astropaths wake screaming. Servitors seize. Vox lines crackle with static that forms no language, only a rhythm, a pattern, a pulse. As if the universe itself is trying to remember something buried too deep. And then, silence. A silence so profound that even the warp quiets to listen. In that void, the question rises like a prophecy carried on dying breath. What if Raziel, the devourer of souls, the fallen wraith of eternity, entered the 41st millennium? The answer will not come from the stars. It will come from the shadow that now steps through the breach, where no god dares to follow, and no soul will ever be safe again, far beyond the reach of any imperial chart. Past the broken edge of the galaxy where even the Astronomicon's light cannot reach, space begins to distort. It is not the shimmer of a warp storm, nor the sickness of demonic energy. It is colder, cleaner, and infinitely older. A ripple spreads through the void, bending light and silence alike. Mechanicum augers in forgotten stations register impossible readings, negative mass fluctuations, spectral echoes that do not belong to the warp. Servitors melt from sensory overload. Then in a single, soundless pulse, reality cracks. A tear blooms open, vast and shimmering like a wound in glass. From within spills a light that is not illumination, but memory, hollow, blue and eternal. Two universes brush against each other, the spectral plane and the materium, their boundaries grinding like tectonic plates of existence. The warp recoils instinctively, sensing something it cannot consume. For the first time in aeons, the immaterium withdraws. The chaos gods hiss in confusion, unable to grasp what has arrived. The rift is not born from psychic thought or demonic will. It is something purer, a fracture carved by balance itself. Through that breach, the dead whisper. Lost souls cry out as they are torn between dimensions, their essence drawn toward the new current. Energy storms spiral, turning entire asteroid belts into ghostlight. On the edge of this impossible phenomenon, reality itself begins to howl, and then movement. A shadow glides from within the tear, slender, graceful, terrible. The stars dim around it, as if refusing to shine upon what steps through. The rift quivers, struggling to contain the force that passes from the spectral into the living. The very laws of physics groan beneath the strain. For a heartbeat, the galaxy itself holds its breath. The warp, the material, the spiritual all converge. The realms have touched. The boundary is gone. and something not born of this universe has entered it. Out of the breach drifts a figure, neither spirit nor flesh, neither living nor dead. His form flickers between shadow and flame, his body cloaked in tattered remnants of a world long gone. In his hand burns a blade of pure soul fire, its glow feeding on the silence itself. The Reaver hums, alive and hungry, sensing the feast that lies ahead. Raziel stands upon nothing, yet the void bends beneath him as though afraid to touch his presence. His skin, once pale and mortal, now shimmers with the faint translucence of the spectral realm. His eyes ignite with a cold azure light, the light of one who sees the truth behind matter, the spirit behind flesh. He looks around and feels it instantly, the sickness of this universe, endless war, ceaseless pain, a cycle so ancient that even death has grown weary of it. To Raziel, the galaxy is not a realm of life, but a graveyard of souls trapped in unending torment. Each world screams, each system bleeds. The air itself trembles with agony. He stretches his senses outward, tasting the echoes of billions. Mortal minds crying out in faith, fear, and madness. Machine souls bound in iron cages, daemon hearts burning with warp fire. To him, it is a chorus of suffering, and in that sound he hears purpose. Raziel's wings, once torn and ruined, unfurl as spectral constructs, vast arcs of shifting energy, neither shadow nor light. They move as thought, not muscle. He does not need air to fly, nor gravity to bind him. He walks upon existence as others walk upon stone. He whispers a name once spoken by gods now forgotten. The Reaver answers, its edge rippling with energy drawn from the souls nearby. In that moment, Raziel knows where he is, among men who worship death and machines who claim to feel. A universe built on the consumption of the living, ruled by the hunger of the dead. It is familiar. It is home. But Raziel is no conqueror. He is judgment given form. His hunger is not born of rage, but of balance. In his eyes, every soul here is weighed, measured, and already found wanting. A tremor rolls through the stars as he steps forward. The warp recoils from his presence. Demons scatter like ash in sunlight. Every psyker within 100 light years wakes screaming, their connection to the immaterium severed by something that does not belong. Raziel looks toward the distant light of terror, faint, flickering, golden. He feels it, the mind that governs this decaying empire. It is powerful, ancient, but tainted with pride. A god who cages his own kind in the name of salvation. The Wraith smiles, a soundless motion in the dark. He knows now why he has come, not to rule this galaxy, but to cleanse it. Raziel drifts through the dark, following the pulse of distant souls. The galaxy opens before him like a scar, vast, luminous, and rotten to its core. Stars flicker like dying embers in an endless night. He sees worlds chained in the name of order, cities drowned in faith, and armies raised only to die again and again. Everywhere he feels the same truth. This is not a universe of life. It is a machine of suffering. Humanity prays to a corpse on a throne. Demons wage wars that never end. Machines worship forgotten gods. Even the so-called immortals of chaos are little more than prisoners of their hunger. Raziel moves unseen across the void. He watches from the shadow of moons as imperial ships tear through space, their crews whispering prayers to engines that no longer hear them. He passes through a dead Eldar craft world, its halls echoing with spectral cries of a race that once defied time itself, now reduced to dust and ghosts. He stands over a tyrannid hive fleet, sensing the cold, empty intelligence of creatures that live only to consume. Even they are bound by instinct, slaves to a deeper appetite. To Raziel, this galaxy is a mirror of his own lost world. Once he too served gods who promised eternity. Once he too fed on the weak to survive. But here the scale is infinite. Here the rot has become the law of existence. He raises his gaze toward the distant warp storms swirling beyond the eye of terror. He can feel them watching him, vast intelligences built from madness and sin. They are curious, almost amused. They whisper across the void, trying to claim his soul as their own. But when their power touches him, it burns. Raziel is not born of their chaos. He is older than the warp itself. He is what their kind fears most, a hunger that consumes the soul, not for power, but for release. In the dark between stars, Raziel speaks softly, his voice a vibration through time itself. No one hears the words, but every psychic being in the sector feels them, a pulse of meaning that freezes the blood. The age of endless war, of worship and despair, has lasted too long. Balance must return. The Reaver hums in his hand, alive with purpose. Souls across the galaxy tremble as the first echo of his will passes through creation. Somewhere deep within the Palace of Terror, the Emperor stirs. His golden light flickers as he senses a presence not born of the warp, not shaped by man, but something else, something that judges even gods. And across the void, Raziel takes his first step toward the heart of mankind's empire. He does not march for conquest. He walks for redemption and for reckoning. Far across the void, upon the throne world of terror, the air itself begins to shake. The Astronomicon, the psychic beacon that guides every imperial vessel through the warp, flickers like a candle drowning in its own wax. Choirs of astropaths scream in unison, their minds scorched by something that doesn't belong in their visions. Their voices merge into one trembling whisper, carried through the halls of the palace like a dying prayer. It is not the warp. It is not chaos. It is something older. Within the golden throne, the Emperor opens his mind to the void. For the first time in centuries, he feels something that resists even his perception. A ripple that does not flow through the warp, but around it. A being that does not draw upon psychic energy, yet bends reality simply by existing. The sensation is cold, calm, and terrifyingly deliberate. He focuses, sending his consciousness outward, through the void, past the barriers of light and distance. He reaches toward the disturbance like a man touching the edge of a storm. What he finds is not a demon nor a god, but a presence of impossible stillness. It feels like hunger without desire, judgment without emotion, and it watches back. For a heartbeat, the Emperor feels his own reflection, another soul who has walked eternity, who has seen gods rise and fall, who carries the weight of a dying creation. It is not hatred that meets his gaze, but recognition. Then the connection breaks. The Emperor draws a long, slow breath. His chamber fills with the faint hum of the throne's machinery. Custodes glance toward him, uncertain, for they can sense the unease radiating from their master. The Emperor's voice is quiet, but edged with something rare: concern. Something has entered this galaxy, he murmurs within the walls of his mind. Not a demon, not a Xenos, not a man. Something that walks between. He turns his gaze toward the stars, toward the outer edges beyond the eye of terror, where the disturbance first stirred. In the depths of his sight, he glimpses the faint shimmer of a figure cloaked in blue fire, moving between dimensions like a ghost crossing a mirror. The Emperor summons his advisors, psychic savants, and inquisitors. Orders ripple through the Imperium. silent observation, immediate containment if possible, destruction if not. But even as his will spreads across the galaxy, he knows the truth. This is no enemy to be easily contained. This is something that even he, the master of mankind, cannot predict. And far from terror, in the cold emptiness between stars, Raziel feels the weight of that golden gaze. He turns his head slightly as if acknowledging it, and for the briefest instant, both beings, God and Wraith, understand one another. Two immortals bound by duty, separated by purpose. The Emperor's light steadies, but the shadow has already begun to move. The galaxy holds its breath once more. The void was silent when Raziel arrived. A barren world drifted beneath him, its surface a labyrinth of steel, fire, and servitude. It was a forge world, one of thousands devoted to the cult of the machine god. Its sky was veiled in ash, its oceans replaced by molten rivers of slag. To the Imperium, it was a sacred place of creation. To Raziel, it was a tomb. He descended like a ghost, unseen by sensors, unmarked by auspex or psychic scan. The moment his feet touched the scorched earth, the air itself changed. The hum of engines faltered. The red glare of manufactoria dimmed. Thousands of souls toiled below, men fused with metal, their lives reduced to the rhythm of gears and prayers. They were still alive, but hollow inside, their essence bled dry by endless obedience. Raziel could feel them. Every heartbeat, every flicker of life. Each one a faint echo in the endless dark. He moved through the corridors unseen, his shadows sliding across walls of iron like liquid night. To the workers, the temperature dropped suddenly, and the air grew heavy. Servitors paused mid-task, their mechanical limbs twitching without command. Something ancient was walking among them. Then came the first guards. Skitarii soldiers, augmented and loyal to the Omnissiah, saw him appear between the pillars of steam. Their optics glowed red as they raised their rifles. The first volley tore through where he stood, but the rounds passed through him, slicing nothing but air. Raziel stepped forward, the Reaver awakening in his grasp. It flared with blue light, and with each pulse, the nearest soldiers froze. Their spirits were being pulled from their bodies, their flesh collapsing like hollow shells. He consumed them not in cruelty, but by nature. To him, they were sustenance, flickering embers returning to balance. The alarms began to scream. From deep within the forges, Mechanicus priests bellowed Binharic prayers. Battle servitors thundered into the open, their arms bristling with plasma and chain blades. Raziel turned his gaze toward them, the soul light in his eyes brightening. When they attacked, the energy of their souls flickered and then went out. Their metallic husks fell silent, their spirits devoured in an instant. From orbit, Imperial augurs detected a disturbance unlike anything recorded. Not a warp signature, not psychic, something else, something that erased the warp around it. They watched as their own battle machines simply died, as if the will animating them had been plucked away. Word spread fast. Inquisitorial channels called it heresy. The Mechanicum called it impossible. But to the terrified survivors, it was something simpler, something primal. They whispered of a figure wrapped in rags of shadow and fire, a creature that fed on souls and left only silence. They gave him a name, the Soul Hunter. And as the forge world burned without flame, Raziel looked to the stars. He felt the ripple of fear spreading across the Imperium, and he knew the message had been sent. His presence could no longer remain a secret. He whispered softly into the windless air, his voice carrying into the void. The harvest has begun. The news spreads through the Imperium like fire through dry paper. Vox channels whisper of a forge world gone silent. Millions vanished. No survivors, no wreckage, only echoes of drained life. To some it is heresy. To others, an omen. To the Inquisition it is a problem that must be erased before it becomes belief. Within a fortress monastery on Terra, the High Lords confer in hushed tones. Reports are fragmented, yet one word repeats itself across every data slate: soulless. The Emperor's psychic web has felt the loss, a vacuum where countless lives should still burn. The decision is immediate. The Ordo Malleus, the hunters of demons, is dispatched. An inquisitor named Tiber Arcos takes command. Cold, devout, and utterly merciless, he believes the anomaly to be a warp incursion, a trick of chaos disguised in purity. He gathers a retinue of acolytes, sanctioned psychers, and grey knights, the most incorruptible warriors the Imperium possesses. Their destination, the dead Forge World. Their orders: contain, capture if possible, and if not, obliterate. When their strike cruiser drops from the warp, they find the planet shrouded in silence. Its atmosphere still glows with the faint blue shimmer of spectral energy. No daemons. No resistance. Only the echo of screams trapped in metal. The grey knights descend, their armor radiant with wards of faith, their blades humming with psychic fire. They find him among the ruins. Raziel stands upon the carcass of a manufactorum, the Reaver coiled around his arm like a serpent of light. He watches them approach, curious. Their souls burn brightly, clean, disciplined. Warriors forged for one purpose: to fight what they cannot understand. The Inquisitor raises his voice, reciting litanies of exorcism. The psychers chant, their minds reaching for the warp to cage the intruder. But when their power touches Raziel, it unravels. Their connection to the warp flickers out like a candle in a storm. Panic ripples through them. Their faith is strong, but faith has no meaning in the face of something beyond heaven and hell. The first knight charges, halberd raised. Raziel moves once. The world slows. The Reaver sings. The knight's armor remains standing, but his spirit is gone, consumed, drawn into the blade's endless hunger. The others attack in unison, encircling him in silver light. He dances through them like a storm, his form shifting between realms. Their weapons pass through empty air. Their prayers dissolve into silence. In moments, the battle is over. The Inquisitor stands alone, trembling, his mind breaking under the sight of his order's failure. Raziel steps close enough for him to see his own reflection in the Wraith's eyes. What he sees there is not malice, only inevitability. The Reaver flares, and the Inquisitor's soul is gone. From orbit, the strike cruiser receives no response. Sensors show no life. Only a pulse of unknown energy fading into the void. They record it, name it a Class Omega anomaly, and retreat. Across the Imperium, the story spreads in whispers. Some call it a curse, others a miracle. The ecclesiarchy forbids its mention, yet the name grows stronger. The Soul Hunter walks, and not even the Emperor's chosen can stand before him. The failure of the first inquisitorial strike could not be buried. Too many witnesses, too many sensors screaming with spectral readings that defied the known laws of the warp. So the Imperium responded in the only way it knows how, by sending more fire. Weeks later, a grey night battle barge, Sanctis Solis, entered orbit above the same dead Forge World. 100 of the Emperor's most faithful warriors stood ready. These were not the inexperienced brothers lost in the first contact. These were veterans of demon hunts across 10,000 worlds, the purest of the pure. Their very names erased from mortal record, their commander, Grand Master Vardis Calix, spoke with calm certainty as the Thunderhawk descended. He had faced greater horrors than this, or so he believed. "No spirit may resist the Emperor's light," he declared, as the landing thrusters roared. Yet, in the depths of his mind, Even he could feel the chill, the quiet, unnatural absence that spread from this world like a disease. They landed among ruins made of bone-white metal and frozen slag. The air was still, the sky washed in faint blue haze. Auspex scanners failed to read any life, though every warrior could feel eyes upon them. Psychic wards flickered, then died. The silence deepened until even their vox links cracked with static. And then he was there. Raziel stood amidst the debris, cloaked in the tattered shadows of his spectral form. The Reaver burned faintly in his hand, a flame without heat, without mercy. The Grey Knights raised their weapons, reciting their war creed. Psychic power built around them, silver light, holy fire, and the Emperor's name woven into every strike. They charged. Bolter shells and sanctified flame struck Raziel's body, but the rounds passed through him as though through smoke. Their psychic blades, forged to cut through demons, met resistance, but not the kind they knew. Each blow felt like striking water and glass at once. Raziel's form rippled, then solidified. The Reaver lashed out. When it touched the first Grey Knight, the warrior didn't fall. He simply stopped. His armor went still, his soul ripped free so swiftly that no pain could register. His brothers watched the light in his eyes vanish as if snuffed out by unseen hands. The Reaver drank the essence, its glow deepening to a cold, ancient blue. The squad retaliated with psychic fury. Warp lightning cascaded through the ruins. Raziel's body burned with spectral flame, but he did not scream. The warp energy slid across him and dissolved. He raised his head slowly, eyes like twin suns behind frost. "Your power feeds on the false," his voice echoed, a vibration more than a sound. "Mine feeds on truth." Then he struck again, faster than thought. Each movement tore between the physical and the spectral plane, a blur of judgment. To the Grey Knights he was everywhere at once, a ghost devouring gods. Their wards shattered, their prayers faltered. Grand Master Vardis Calix was the last to stand. His armor scorched, his halberd trembling, he called out to the Emperor in defiance. His words never finished. The Reaver pierced his chestplate, and for an instant his soul burned brighter than any star, before vanishing forever. When silence returned, only Raziel remained. He stood among their fallen forms, the Reaver quiet, its hunger briefly sated. The warp energy surrounding the battlefield evaporated, leaving stillness so complete it seemed holy. From orbit, the surviving ship received the final transmission, a single, incomprehensible pulse that ended with the words, "No warp, no soul, only silence." The Imperium tried to understand. They called him a heretic spirit, a lost god, a new enemy beyond chaos. But the truth was far simpler. He was not a servant of the warp. He was the one thing even demons feared, a predator of souls. Across the immaterium, the warp trembles. Its tides, once eternal and unchallenged, begin to recede in places where Raziel has walked. Billions of whispers ripple through the sea of madness. Demons feel hunger gnawing at their essence, a cold reminder that even they are not beyond death. The great powers, the ruinous four, turn their gaze toward the material realm. Khorne, lord of rage and blood, senses the imbalance first. To him, Raziel is an insult carved into existence, a hunter who kills without passion, without fury. His brass citadel quakes as he roars across eternity. In his voice worlds burn. He demands the wraith's skull be brought to his throne to prove that the galaxy still belongs to Wrath. Tzeentch, weaver of fate, watches through 1,000 eyes that never blink. In Raziel, he sees paradox, a being who exists outside the pattern, neither demon nor mortal, neither servant nor master, a thread that unravels destiny itself. The changer of ways whispers to his disciples that this creature cannot be predicted. It must be studied, perhaps even imitated, but never ignored. Nurgle chuckles in his garden of rot. To him all things eventually decay, all souls return to his embrace. But Raziel's touch erases rather than transforms. To Nurgle that is blasphemy, a form of death that offers no rebirth, no renewal. He releases his plagues into the warp, hoping to find the wraith's scent and drown it beneath a sea of filth. Slaanesh watches last, smiling through 1,000 mirrored faces. The Dark Prince feels fascination rather than fear. The purity of Raziel's purpose, his cold restraint, his beauty in violence, it is intoxicating. Slaanesh whispers to the shadows, offering temptation in the form of remembrance, the chance for Raziel to feel again, to reclaim the passions lost in his fall. But Raziel hears them all. From the border between worlds, where his essence drifts between the spectral and the real, their voices reach him. They promise power, dominion, worship. They promise release from his endless hunger. Yet to Raziel their words are dust. He has heard the voices of gods before, and he knows their hunger mirrors his own. But twisted, corrupted, driven by vanity, he stands in the shadow of a dying moon, his Reaver pulsing with the echo of devoured souls. The warp around him convulses, forming into shapes, faces, claws, manifestations of the Four. Khorne's hound steps forward first, its armor forged from bone and rage, its snarls, red eyes glowing with slaughter. Raziel does not move. The creature lunges, and the Reaver sings. A single arc of blue flame cuts through flesh and spirit alike. The demon's roar dies before it leaves its throat. Its essence does not return to the warp. It is consumed, unmade. The void falls silent again. In that instant, the gods feel something they have not felt in millennia. Loss, true loss, a death that even they cannot undo. The warp recoils in pain. Entire demonic hosts scream as the balance tilts, and Raziel looks toward their unseen forms through the rift, his voice quiet, steady, eternal. "You are not gods," he says, his words echoing through the immaterium like thunder. "You are hunger, nothing more, and I am its end." The gods withdraw, enraged and afraid. The eye of terror boils with crimson storms. The veil between worlds thickens and fractures all at once. For the first time since the birth of chaos, the ruinous powers know that something walks beyond their reach. A wraith that feeds on their worship, their wars, their very purpose, and, in the mortal realm, Raziel begins to move again toward the heart of mankind's empire, and toward the golden being who dares to call himself its god. The void seethes. A storm is gathering, larger than anything charted since the birth of the Eye of Terror. Its center lies between dead stars, where the warp leaks into reality like blood through torn flesh. The Imperium's ships give it a name, the Reaver's Tempest. But to the beings that dwell in the Immaterium, it is something else. It is a challenge. Within the heart of the storm, a gate yawns open, an open wound between realms. From it, the champions of chaos step forward. They are no longer men, but monuments to their master's will. Demon princes forged from hate, each a god's chosen weapon. One bears Khorne's mark, his skin plated with brass, and his veins pumping molten rage. Another carries Tzeentch's shifting colors, his form rewriting itself every heartbeat. Behind them trail the spawn of Slaanesh, graceful horrors wrapped in the music of suffering, and the rotting hulks of Nurgle's children. Oozing corruption that kills the ground it touches, they come not for conquest, but vengeance. The gods demand the wraith's soul. The storm opens wider, spilling lightning made of memory, and from the rift's edge Raziel descends. His wings unfurl like torn veils, half matter, half spirit, glimmering with cold flame. The Reaver in his grasp vibrates with recognition. It knows their kind. It has tasted their essence before, in worlds long lost to time. The first to strike is the champion of Khorne. He bellows a name that shakes galaxies, swinging a blade forged from the spine of a titan. Raziel does not retreat. He meets the blow with one of his own. When their weapons touch, the air detonates, vaporizing a continent below. The champion's rage fuels him, each strike faster, harder, louder. But Raziel moves with purpose. No fury, no emotion, only inevitability. The Reaver flares, absorbing the demon's soul with a single perfect cut. Silence follows. Tzeentch's emissary attacks next, hurling storms of reality, bending time, turning cause into effect. Raziel walks through the illusions untouched. For one moment he is everywhere, his form splitting into spectral afterimages that burn with truth. The demon screams as the Reaver cuts through its 1,000 futures at once. Its body folds in on itself and vanishes, erased not by death but by correction. The champions of decay and excess lunge together, twin waves of pestilence and pleasure. The Reaver answers them both. Where it moves, the rot withers, the songs die, the beauty fades. Their forms unravel, screaming as their essence is drawn into the blade. When the light fades, Raziel stands alone. Amid the wreckage of gods, the warp howls. Its sea of madness convulses in agony. The gods themselves recoil, their realms trembling under the weight of true destruction. Souls of slain demons swirl around Raziel, burning blue and white, absorbed into his being. For the first time, even chaos feels what mortals have always known: fear. Raziel looks upward through the storm, his voice steady and calm. The balance returns, he says, though none remain to hear it. With a thought, he closes the rift. The tempest collapses into stillness. For the briefest instant, the warp falls silent across half the galaxy. Astropaths lose their connection. Demons vanish mid-battle. Imperial fleets report an impossible calm. And somewhere on Terra, the Emperor opens his eyes. He has felt the clash, two eternities colliding in the dark. He knows now that the stranger is no mere phantom. A new god walks the galaxy, and he must decide whether to face him or to find a way to use him. On Terra, the air itself trembles. The Astronomicon flickers again, not in failure, but in recognition. For a moment that no mortal can measure, the Emperor's vast mind spans the gulf of stars, reaching for the source of this new power. He has seen gods rise and fall, has faced beings that could tear reality apart with a thought. But this presence is different. It is not chaos, not warp, not divine. It is the void given purpose. Within the darkness of the golden throne chamber, the Emperor withdraws from the light of 1,000 souls that feed his dying body. He turns inward into the deep places of his mind where memories of creation still burn. He remembers the day humanity first whispered of gods, the day belief became prison. He knows what worship can do, how it feeds the warp, how it births monsters. Now something has entered that same reality and consumes the very food of gods, Raziel. The name alone hums with power, echoing across time like a forbidden chord. For the first time in an age, the Emperor feels something he has long forgotten. Uncertainty. He speaks and the custodes kneel at once, His voice is calm, yet it rolls through the chamber like thunder restrained by wisdom. Orders are given, silent observation, no engagement. The sigillite priests record his words in sacred code. Across the Imperium, watchers are placed on every world touched by the spectral disturbances. But in the Emperor's mind, the decision has already taken form. He will reach out, not through armies or faith, but through thought itself. A being that devours souls cannot be destroyed by steel. It can only be understood, perhaps redirected, perhaps used. He closes his eyes, and his consciousness leaves the throne, soaring through the void like a spear of golden light. It crosses systems, galaxies, storms of warp and silence until it finds him. Raziel hovers in the ruins of the demon world he has just erased, his form wreathed in the faint echo of consumed divinity. The Reaver glows, alive and hungry. When the Emperor's mind touches his, the universe stills. There are no words at first, only understanding. The Emperor sees the truth of him, an ancient soul, broken, devoured, remade beyond redemption, yet bound to balance. Raziel sees the Emperor in turn, not as a god, but as a man who chained himself to eternity in the name of salvation. Two beings burdened by duty, mirrors of each other in different cages. When at last they speak, their voices blend with the hum of the cosmos. The Emperor offers alliance, not out of fear, but necessity. Cleanse the warp, his thought echoes. Destroy the corruption that feeds upon my people, and I will give you purpose. Humanity can be saved. Raziel listens, his spectral eyes glowing brighter. He feels the weight of truth and irony in equal measure. You seek balance only to preserve control, he replies. You build empires of obedience and call it order. I destroy the chains you forge. The Emperor's presence flickers, the faintest trace of sorrow touching his tone. Without order, there is only chaos. Without my hand, mankind dies, screaming in the dark. Raziel tilts his head, his form shifting between light and shadow. Then let them be reborn without your gods. The link breaks. The Emperor draws back into the throne, the golden glow around him dimming. The custodes wait for his command, but he says nothing. His mind remains fixed on that final sentence. Simple, unyielding, dangerous. In the silent chamber, he whispers to himself, more thought than sound. He cannot be controlled, but perhaps he can be guided. Across the stars, Raziel turns toward terror, feeling the echo of that thought. His wings flare, spectral fire trailing in his wake. Both beings now know that they are bound by fate, by opposition, by inevitability. The Emperor prepares for diplomacy. Raziel prepares for judgment, and the galaxy itself waits trembling between salvation and extinction. The void was never truly silent, except now. In the aftermath of Raziel's slaughter of demon princes, even the warp storms had stilled, leaving a hollow calm that spread like a bruise across the stars. It was within this quiet that the Eldar, ancient, dying, and desperate, felt the first ripples of something new. On the craft world of Ulthway, where the infinity circuits hummed with the memories of billions of souls, the Farseers gathered. They cast their minds through the skein of fate, searching for the source of the disturbance that even the warp refused to name. What they saw was not a future, but an absence, a tear in destiny where threads simply vanished. Entire timelines burned away like parchment in flame. At its center stood one figure, pale, winged, devouring light, Raziel. Their visions trembled. The seer council recoiled from the sight, their souls flickering as the image burned itself into the wraithbone halls. Some wept silently, their centuries of composure breaking under the weight of a truth they could not interpret. One spoke at last. He is not of the warp.
Not of life, not of death.
He is a wound that thinks, the council debated. Some believed he was an omen of final extinction, a being that would devour even the memory of the Eldar. Others whispered that perhaps he was balance incarnate, a force to erase chaos itself and grant them peace at last. Desperation overrode fear. They sent an emissary, not an army, not a fleet, but a single farseer whose soul shone with untainted light. Her name was Serenith, the youngest to ever walk the path of prophecy. She travelled through the webway, carrying psychic wards older than the stars, her every step a plea for understanding. When she emerged into real space, the void seemed to fold around her. There, above a dying world, Raziel stood in the upper atmosphere, still as a god in contemplation. His wings unfurled slowly, spectral fire tracing symbols in the dark. Serenith reached out, her mind brushing against his like light across ice. She spoke not with words, but with the song of thought. Wraith of another age, the skein trembles beneath your shadow.
Tell us, do you mean to end all things?
Raziel turned to her. The Reaver's faint hum filled the space between them, a heartbeat made of memory. For a moment, the souls within the craft world's infinity circuit stirred, as if recognizing him. His voice came softly, without anger or malice, yet it carried through both realms at once.
I end only what has already begun.
You feel the corruption even in your immortal hearts. The gods you fear were born from your hunger.
I simply remove the feast. The far-seer's mind quivered under the weight of his words.
If you destroy the warp, you destroy our souls. We are bound to it. Raziel's gaze lingered on her, unreadable. Then your kind chained itself to poison and called it eternity. She tried to warn him. The Emperor will see you as threat, not balance. He will come for you. Raziel's wings flared. For an instant the void rippled with light. He already watches. The Reaver pulsed once, and Serenith felt her soul tremble. He did not kill her, but he marked her, left a spark of his essence within her mind.
A reminder, a warning,
a truth too vast to bear. When she returned to Ulthwé, her eyes glowed faintly low. The council demanded answers. She gave them none, only words spoken in a voice that no longer sounded like hers. The galaxy stands on the edge of silence, and when it comes,
even the gods will beg for it. From that day, the Eldar named him the devourer of echoes.
A force not of the warp, but of the space beyond it, a being that would unmake the sound of creation itself. The rift Raziel had carved through demon and fate left echoes that refused to fade. Even the most distant sensors of the Adeptus Mechanicus began to register irregularities. Energy fields collapsed without cause. Whole plasma arrays dimmed. Binary prayers faltered mid-chant. To the priests of Mars, these were not malfunctions, they were omens. On the surface of the red world, the endless factories roared and bled smoke into the thin sky. Titans, the walking gods of the Imperium, stood in ranks that stretched beyond the horizon, colossi of steel, faith, and slavery. Inside each machine, 1,000 souls screamed in silence, bound by circuitry and ritual to power the god engines. Their essence had become fuel, their prayers converted into motion. Raziel felt them long before he saw them. Their suffering called to him through the void, a chorus of trapped life wrapped in iron. He descended unseen, the air freezing in his wake. Electropriests dropped to their knees, their augmetic eyes fogging with frost, as their spirits sensed a presence no logic engine could define. He walked among them like a phantom, his shadow sliding across crimson sand. The Reaver flickered in his hand, pulsing in rhythm with the tortured souls inside the Titans. He looked up at the nearest god machine, a warlord-class engine whose carapace bore the sigil of the Omnisire. Its reactor heart beat with stolen faith. Its spirit was dying. Raziel raised his free hand and touched the hull.
Metal screamed.
Every soul within the machine turned toward him in sudden awareness. For the first time in centuries, they remembered what it was to feel. The Titan convulsed, its reactor flaring, its mechanical limbs locking in place. The priests cried out, flooding the Vox with binary panic. He whispered a single thought, not in any tongue of man or machine, but in the language of the spirit: rest. The energy within the Titans surged outward in a wave of blue fire. Light spilled from every joint and seam as the bound souls poured free, streaming into the Reaver's blade. The giant shuddered once, then fell still. When the light faded, the god machine was an empty shell, its metal cold, its spirit gone. The ground shook as more Titans staggered, one after another, their link to the forge severed. The Mechanicus screamed prayers, trying to summon the machine god's protection, but the Omnisire did not answer. Raziel's presence drowned out their faith. He turned slowly toward the assembled priests. Their vox grills crackled with fear. Some fled. Others, overcome by awe, fell prostrate before him. To them, he was the incarnation of the divine, a spirit come to reclaim what was stolen. Raziel spoke, his voice echoing through the forges and over the plains of Mars. You built gods from dead men. You chained souls to iron and called it worship. I unchained them, the forges dimmed. Reactors failed. Across the planet, tens of thousands of machines went silent as their animating spirits were drawn into the spectral current. Whole manufactoria collapsed inwards, their foundations hollowed by the loss of power. From orbit, the crimson world flickered like a dying ember. Data shrines recorded an impossible event: total spiritual energy loss across multiple sectors. The tech priests named it the devouring of Mars. When the silence settled, Raziel stood alone amid the ruins. The Reaver glowed brighter than ever, heavy with the souls he had freed. He looked toward the stars, toward Terra, where he could already feel the Emperor's gaze pressing down like sunlight on frost. He whispered into the void, his tone neither threat nor promise. Your empire feeds on the dead. I will end the feast. And with that, he vanished into the dark between worlds, leaving behind a silent planet and a legend whispered in binary prayers: the Reaver of Mars, the soul that starved the gods. The loss of Mars was not merely a military disaster, it was a spiritual wound. Across the Imperium, manufactoria ground to a halt, fleets stalled mid-crusade, and weapons of war fell silent without their sacred maintenance rites. But worse than that, worse than the silence of machines, was the silence of faith. For the first time in 10,000 years, prayers went unanswered. The Mechanicus called it the Great Stillness. The Ecclesiarchy called it the Shadow of the Wraith. The Inquisition called it the beginning of collapse. On Terra, the High Lords convened in chambers meant for triumph, now heavy with dread. The Red Priests screamed blasphemy, claiming the Omnisire himself had been devoured. The cardinals of the Ecclesiarchy countered that a demon of impossible power had risen to mock the Emperor. Both were wrong, but neither would listen. Whispers rippled through the Imperium faster than ships could travel. Whole hives fell to chaos, riots born not of rebellion, but of despair. In the streets of Necromunda, preachers shouted of a new god who walks between death and life. On Cadia's ruined soil, soldiers carved a single symbol into their armor, a spiral of blue flame. Some called Raziel the angel of the second dawn, others the wraith of judgment. But to most he was simply the end of certainty. the Adeptus Astartes began to divide. Some chapters saw his actions as heresy, an attack upon the very heart of the Imperium. Others saw them as divine justice. The Blood Ravens declared publicly that Raziel was proof the Emperor's light had never been divine, only borrowed. The Black Templars vowed to hunt the creature to the edge of the galaxy, and the Grey Knights, their numbers broken and their faith shaken, fell silent, their fortress monasteries closing their gates to all outsiders. The warp itself responded to the turmoil. Storms flickered and died in places that had boiled for millennia. Demons vanished mid-howl. Psychers across the Imperium found their powers fading, their connection to the immaterium severed. For some it was relief. For others, terror. On 1,000 worlds new cults rose. They did not worship the Emperor, nor chaos, nor the machine. They worshipped the balance. Their sermons were simple. The gods have eaten long enough. The wraith will make them starve. These heresies spread faster than any inquisitor could burn them out. Even within the Palace of Terror, servants whispered prayers to the Reaver before lighting the sacred lamps. In the cathedrals of the ecclesiarchy, icons of the Emperor were found defaced, not destroyed, but altered. His face half-shrouded, his halo replaced by twin wings of blue flame. The High Lords declared a state of absolute secrecy. No mention of the being was to reach the common people. But the Imperium was too vast, its people too afraid, its faith too fragile. The name could not be contained. In the darkness of the throne room, the Emperor felt their fear. It echoed through the web of human souls like thunder. He could sense the shift in belief, the fragile turning of billions of minds, and he knew the truth he had always feared. Even gods could be replaced. He spoke softly into the void, his words reaching none but himself. Faith is the only chain I cannot break. But Raziel, drifting between worlds, heard the echo anyway. He understood it not as confession, but as confirmation. The galaxy had lived too long in worship. Now it trembled on the edge of remembrance of what it meant to exist without gods at all. And Raziel, the soul that devoured faith itself, was coming to finish what he had begun. For millennia, the warp had been the Imperium's cruel companion, its storm and its highway, its curse and its salvation.
Now it lay wounded.
The death of the demon princes, the devouring of Mars, and the fading of prayers had bled it thin. The tides no longer raged as they once did. They whispered instead, hollow and fearful. In the eye of terror, the great powers conspired. The ruins of slain demons drifted like ash across a crimson sea, feeding no master, healing no wound. The ruinous four gathered what remained of their strength and turned their gaze upon reality. To them, Raziel was not merely a threat. He was starvation. Khorne's laughter shook his brass citadel.
He robs me of blood. No slaughter, no offering. Even war itself grows cold.
He slammed his axe into the ground, and rivers of molten rage spilled into the void. Tzeentch's 1,000 faces frowned. He consumes the pattern before I can weave it. Every plan, every thread ends in silence. The changer of ways looked into the skein of fate and saw only absence. If he cannot be turned, he must be deceived. Nurgle's laughter died in his throat. His gardens withered. No rot touches him.
No decay binds him.
He steals my children and leaves no corpses to grow again. The plague god lifted a handful of blackened soil that dissolved into dust. There is no cycle where he walks. Slaanesh smiled last, but there was no joy in it.
He does not feel.
He takes without savour. He kills beauty and ugliness alike. There is no pleasure in his hunger. The Prince of Excess stretched out a pale hand toward the material realm. Let him taste what he has denied himself. Let him face his reflection. The four spoke as one. He must be destroyed before the balance tips forever. And so they reached into the warp, into the places where thought becomes flesh and faith becomes weapon. From their combined will, they birthed an army, the Abaddon Unbound, 10 legions of the damned reforged in the crucible of divine fury. Demon princes who had once fallen now rose again, reshaped and cursed, to hunt the one that had unmade them. Each was bound by their god's collective oath, destroy the devourer or be erased. The warp tore open above the dolmen rift, a scar between galaxies where dead stars spun in silence. There, the legions poured through, 10,000 strong, armored in madness, their war cries shaking the veil between worlds. Their purpose was singular, their hatred absolute. But Raziel was already waiting. He stood upon an asteroid bathed in the faint glow of a dying sun, his form haloed in blue fire. The Reaver pulsed with the energy of the souls he had consumed, the echo of Mars, the memory of gods. His wings spread wide, spectral and infinite. He felt them before he saw them, the storm of chaos, the roar of divinity. He could sense the warp's fury trying to mend itself through violence. But he also felt something else, a new clarity. The warp was not merely power. It was hunger made form. He understood now that it could not be destroyed outright.
It could only be made to devour itself. The Reaver's voice whispered in his mind.
The souls within it screamed for release, and Raziel, for the first time in eons, listened. When the first of the legions reached him, reality itself split. Demons screamed through the breach, their bodies flickering with godlight. Raziel stepped forward and spoke, his tone calm, almost mournful. You were born of men's weakness, of desire, of faith.
I end not your existence, but your purpose. The Reaver ignited, a beam of blinding blue stretching from horizon to horizon.
When it struck the first demon host, their souls burst into ash. The energy of their uncreation fed the blade, which flared brighter still. In the eye of terror, the gods howled. Their creations were dying again, but now their essence was being turned against them. The warp's own fire was being used to burn it clean. The legions pressed on, their fury endless, but Raziel only grew stronger. The storm became a war between realms, warp and spectral, belief and truth, chaos and silence, and as the battle raged, the gods began to understand. Their weapons would not save them. Every act of hate, every ounce of faith, every soul that called their name only fed the thing they sought to destroy. The warp betrayed itself. Its very hunger was now its doom. When the last legion fell, Raziel stood amid a void that no longer screamed. The warp storm dimmed. The eye of terror flickered, its edges trembling like glass about to shatter. The gods recoiled into the darkness of their own making,
wounded beyond measure, and Raziel turned toward the one realm that still stood, the realm of man.
The Emperor's light still burned there, but it was dimming. When word reached Terra that the Eye of Terror had fallen silent, the Astronomicon flickered like a candle in the wind. Every astropath in the palace cried out in the same instant, a shared vision of a blue flame consuming the stars, leaving behind only quiet. The master of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica died where he stood, his mind scorched by what he'd seen. In the golden throne chamber, the Emperor did not move. His armor shone like a dying sun, but within that stillness burned a storm. He had felt the death of the warp's great powers, and though he had long despised them, their end filled him not with victory, but with unease. For 10 millennia, the Imperium had lived upon a knife's edge, balanced between the material and the immaterial. Chaos was both enemy and necessity. The warp was the lifeblood of his empire, the fire that powered his dream of mankind's survival. If Raziel's cleansing continued, that fire would go out, and the Imperium with it. His mind stretched across the cosmos, touching every spark of psychic life that remained. He felt the psionic field of humanity flicker, weaken.
Millions of navigators lost their way, their connection to the warp severed. Fleets went adrift.
Communication died. And still Raziel pressed on, consuming the remnants of gods and ghosts alike. The Emperor whispered to himself, not in fear, but in bitter recognition. He is not chaos, he is not order, he is the consequence. Malkador, the sigillite, or what remained of his echo within the throne's psychic matrix, answered softly. And you must stop him, my lord. Can I stop what is already inevitable? The Emperor thought. He devours belief, and mankind cannot exist without it. If I strike him, I confirm his truth, that even I am only faith made flesh. For a moment, the master of mankind felt the faintest echo of something long buried: doubt. He closed his eyes and saw Raziel drifting through the void, a being made of sorrow and will. He saw the Reaver burning bright with stolen souls, each one a whisper of freedom and finality. He saw himself mirrored in that figure, two immortals bound to impossible purposes.
One seeking control, the other seeking release. The Emperor's voice finally broke the silence, a thunder that shook the chamber.
Prepare the custodes.
Summon the Grey Knights.
Gather the choir of the 1,000. The High Lords bowed, trembling beneath the weight of his words.
Are we at war, my Emperor?
His reply was cold as iron. Not yet. But when he reaches Terra, there will be no diplomacy.
Only truth. He rose from the throne for the first time in an age.
His golden armor hummed with restrained divinity, his eyes burning with stars yet unborn. The psychic engines of the palace flared to life, saturating the air with ozone and faith. Far above, the Astronomicon shone once more, not as a beacon, but as a sword. In the void, Raziel turned his head toward the light. He could feel the Emperor's gaze pierce the spectral barrier between them. Neither blinked.
Neither bowed. In that eternal second, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. The god who ruled mankind prepared to defend his empire.
The wraith who consumed gods prepared to unmake it. And between them stretched the dying light of everything that ever dared to believe. The void between stars was silent now, too silent. Without the warp, travel had become a crawl through darkness. Yet Raziel moved unhindered. He did not need engines nor light, nor the currents of chaos. He was his own motion, his own path through eternity. Worlds burned in his wake, not by fire, but by revelation. Where he passed, the souls of men flickered like candles suddenly exposed to the truth. Some fell to their knees in awe. Others tore at their eyes, unable to bear what they saw. Faith began to fracture, not because of cruelty, but because Raziel carried something far worse than malice, clarity. He approached the Sol system like an ancient storm rediscovered. The planetary defense networks detected his arrival long before he emerged from the void. The skies above Mars still glowed faintly blue from his earlier touch, and the fleets of the Mechanicus, now little more than ghosts, sent garbled warnings into the void before falling silent. The Imperium's greatest bastions prepared. Battle fleets formed walls of adamantium and plasma around Terra, ships positioned in perfect geometries dictated by the Emperor's own hand. The custodes took their stations in orbit, gleaming like suns, their armor inscribed with prayers of defiance. Titan legions awoke on Luna's surface, their engines roaring to life for what might be their final war. And within the Imperial Palace, the Emperor stood in the Sanctum Imperialis, surrounded by psychic light. The throne no longer held him captive.
His own power sustained the Astronomicon.
For the first time in an age, his spirit and his body were one. When Raziel crossed the heliopause, the void itself quivered. Every sensor in the Sol system screamed, though no sound was heard. Ships reported the impossible, space folding inward, light bending around a single point. The spectral plane was bleeding into reality. He emerged between Mars and Earth, a figure of blue fire and shadow. His wings unfurled, stretching wider than the orbit of moons. The Reaver shone like a second sun.
Around him, the void itself seemed to breathe. The fleets opened fire.
Lance batteries, nova cannons, and plasma storms converged upon him. It was a light show that could have blinded gods. But when the glare faded, he was still there, untouched. The energy simply bent away from him, vanishing into the spectral void that followed in his wake. Raziel looked upon the countless ships, each one filled with human souls, some faithful, some fearful. He saw their prayers, their rage, their confusion. He whispered, not aloud, but into their hearts. You were never slaves to gods. You chose to be. Across the fleets men froze. Some screamed, clutching at their chests as spectral fire coursed through them.
Others wept, their weapons falling from numb hands.
The void battles stopped, not because of destruction, but because belief itself faltered. Then he spoke to the planet below, and the very air of terror shivered. I do not come to rule.
I come to end the lie. The words spread through the noosphere, across the Vox networks, and into the dreams of every living mind.
Billions felt the same sensation, a breath at the back of the neck, a whisper that stripped away certainty. The ecclesiarch tried to rally the people, preaching that the emperor would protect them. But his voice cracked, and before the eyes of the faithful, the gold icons of the god-emperor began to tarnish. From the throne room, the emperor watched it all unfold. He could feel the psychic weight pressing down on terror, the slow, deliberate unmaking of faith itself. Yet he did not flinch. He turned to his custodes. He comes not as a conqueror, but as truth. But truth left unchecked can destroy more than lies. The custodes knelt. Then we fight for the lie that keeps mankind alive, the emperor nodded once, the faintest shadow of regret crossing his face. The golden spires of the imperial palace glowed brighter than ever before as the emperor raised his hand. The Astronomicon blazed to its peak, a surge of psychic power tearing through the atmosphere, meeting Raziel's spectral storm head-on. For the first time since the birth of the galaxy's faith, light and silence collided, and the universe, caught between two absolutes, began to crack. When the Astronomicon flared, it was not light, it was judgment. Every soul in the Sol system felt it, a vibration in the bones, a resonance that spoke in thought rather than sound. The Emperor's radiance flooded the void like a second dawn, and Raziel's spectral fire rose to meet it. For an instant too brief to measure, reality folded in half. The warp screamed from afar, unable to intervene. Terra's atmosphere ignited with gold and blue light. Clouds burned into glass. Oceans flattened beneath the pressure of divine will. The Emperor descended from the heavens in a blaze of psychic fire, golden wings of thought unfurling from his back. His armor was cracked and ancient, yet his presence remade the air around him with every step. Across from him, Raziel hovered above the broken spires of the palace, his form half within the material world and half beyond it. The Reaver burned brighter than the sun, humming with the voices of 1,000 freed souls. His wings spread wide, shimmering like a storm made of memory. The two powers faced one another in silence. There were no heralds, no armies, no witnesses brave enough to approach. Even the custodes fell back, blinded by the purity of what they saw. When the Emperor spoke, his voice carried through every mind on earth. You devour faith, Raziel. Yet without faith, mankind has nothing to rise upon. Raziel's reply came not as words, but as the echo of thought itself. Then perhaps it is time they learn to rise without gods. The Emperor raised his hand. The air split into rivers of golden fire that cascaded toward Raziel like divine judgment. Each flare burned with the essence of humanity's belief, the prayers of 10,000 worlds condensed into pure energy. Raziel raised the Reaver. The blade sang. It caught the Emperor's power and bent it, devoured it, turned it into silence. When the light cleared, he stood untouched. Then he struck. The Reaver sliced through the air, and with it came the song of unmaking. The energy of the spectral plane rippled outward, peeling layers of reality apart. The Emperor caught the blow with his gauntlet, and the impact sent shockwaves across the planet. Mountains shattered. Cathedrals turned to dust. The moon cracked along its equator. The Emperor's counterattack was immediate. He thrust his hand forward, unleashing a beam of golden light that contained the souls of every saint, every martyr, every moment of faith that had ever existed. It struck Raziel full on. The wraith's body staggered, his wings dimming, the Reaver flickering as if torn between feeding and breaking. Within the blaze, Raziel heard voices, millions of them, human prayers, pleading, cursing, begging to be saved. For the first time in an eternity, he faltered. The burden of what he had consumed pressed upon him. The souls cried out not for freedom, but for meaning. The Emperor saw it, the hesitation, the doubt, and pressed forward. He placed his hand on Raziel's chest, light pouring through his fingers. You are power without purpose. Let me give you one. Serve mankind.
Protect what you would destroy. But Raziel's voice rose, raw and unbound.
You protect them with chains. You call obedience peace. You build eternity upon fear. With that, he exploded outward in a surge of blue fire, breaking the Emperor's hold. The Reaver slashed in an arc of spectral energy that tore through the sky itself. The Astronomicon flickered, its beacon faltering for the first time in ages. The Emperor caught the next strike with his sword, the golden blade of psychic flame. The two weapons met, and reality screamed. The collision created a ring of energy that rolled across the planet like a tidal wave. Beneath them, continents split. Above them, the void rippled. Both beings moved faster than light, each strike folding time around itself. Neither yielded gold met blue. Faith met clarity. Order met silence. And, for a single, impossible instant, they understood each other. The Emperor saw that Raziel did not seek to rule, only to end the endless cycle of belief that fed the warp. Raziel saw that the Emperor's empire was not born of ego, but of terror, a desperate effort to keep mankind alive in a universe that wanted it dead. They were reflections, each trapped by what they believed to be mercy. When they spoke again, it was in unison. There can be no gods. And together, their power unleashed, the Emperor's light and Raziel's void merging into one catastrophic burst. It tore through the Astronomicon, shattered the barriers of the warp, and consumed the heavens in white fire. All across the galaxy, stars dimmed. Demons screamed and vanished. Psychers went blind. And in that silence, for the first time since creation began, the warp was still on Terra. The blast left only echoes, gold dust, spectral flame, and the memory of two beings who had reached beyond divinity to end it. When the light faded, nothing remained on the throne but a faint shimmer of blue and gold intertwined. The age of gods was over, and the age of men had begun. When the light vanished, there was no thunder, no roar, no final cry of victory, only quiet. the kind of quiet the galaxy had never known. The warp was gone. Its storms no longer churned. Its whispers, once a constant fever in the minds of the living, had fallen utterly silent. For the first time in uncounted millennia, the veil between the material and the immaterial lay still.
No demons, no voices, no divinity, only the raw hum of the universe itself. On Terra, the people emerged from the ruins of the storm.
The sky, once scarred by eternal warp lightning, now shone a clean, unfamiliar blue. The golden towers of the imperial palace had cracked and crumbled, but they still stood, monuments not of faith, but of survival. In the shattered Sanctum Imperialis, the throne sat empty. The body of the emperor was gone, so was Raziel. All that remained was a single mark burned into the marble floor, a spiral of blue flame entwined with a golden circle. Neither symbol dominated. They turned around each other in endless balance. The custodes gathered there in silence, their weapons lowered, their golden armor dulled. For the first time they had no command, no voice to serve. One knelt and placed his gauntlet upon the symbol. His vox whispered across the hall, "Is this victory or extinction?"
None answered. Across the Imperium, the psychic silence spread.
Ships that once relied on the warp drifted, engines cold, lost among dead stars. Entire orders of psychers collapsed, their minds suddenly empty. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica was no more, but something unexpected took its place. Peace. The voices that had haunted mankind for 10,000 years were gone. No temptation, no rage, no endless pull toward corruption. The universe had become vast, cold, and quiet. In the weeks that followed, humanity began to awaken to a truth older than faith itself. Worlds cut off from Terra began to govern themselves again. Without the guidance of distant priests, people looked to one another instead of heaven. There were no miracles, but no curses either. No god to bless them, no demon to damn them. The ecclesiarchy tried to rise again, proclaiming that the emperor had sacrificed himself to destroy the last evil. But their words fell flat. Without the warp's echo, their prayers were just words. Without miracles, faith had to become something simpler. Hope. On Mars, the forges rekindled not with psionic fire, but with the hands of men. The Mechanicus began to dismantle their ancient rituals, relearning what they had forgotten. Machines obeyed logic, not prayer. For the first time, science breathed again. The surviving Astartes stood divided. Some laid down their arms, choosing to rebuild rather than conquer.
Others, stripped of their psychic link to the emperor, turned feral, warriors without a cause.
Yet even they could no longer draw strength from the warp. Their fury was only human now. The galaxy shrank and slowed. It could no longer cross itself in weeks nor burn worlds in a day. Empires that once spanned light years became systems unto themselves. The age of conquest ended not with a scream, but with a sigh, and in that stillness a strange new reverence began to grow, not for gods, but for the silence itself. People began to whisper of the balance, the harmony left behind when faith and void cancelled each other. The twin symbols of blue and gold were carved into stone, not as idols, but as reminders. The oldest among the scribes wrote, "When the gods were gone, man became real. Yet even as peace began to settle,
strange phenomena stirred at the edge of the galaxy.
Faint flickers of energy, not warp, but something subtler.
Stars pulsing in rhythm.
Dreams returning, not as madness, but as whispers of memory. In that whisper, some claimed to hear two voices, one of light, one of silence, speaking as one. Balance is not the end. It is the beginning, and so the galaxy, stripped bare of divinity, began its slow rebirth. An age without gods had come, not of despair, but of possibility. Mankind stood alone beneath an honest sky, and for the first time in eternity, that was enough. Centuries passed. The galaxy, once roaring with endless war and worship, grew quiet enough for thought to return. Civilizations rebuilt themselves not from dogma but from memory, what fragments remained of the age of gods. The stars, once violent, now moved in calm procession through the void, free of the warp's fever. In the ruins of Terra's old cathedrals, children played where sermons once thundered. The stones still bore scorch marks of gold and blue, relics of a battle no one alive could truly recall. The great libraries of Mars reopened, not as temples, but as universities. Scholars studied what the Mechanicus had once called heresy, biology, physics, the mysteries of the cosmos, discovering slowly what faith had obscured. Yet even in this age of reason, whispers endured. Every few decades, explorers returned from deep space, carrying tales of light seen between galaxies, vast wings of shimmering blue, passing silently through the void. Some said they were dreams,
Others reflections.
but to those who listened long enough, the truth was simpler. Raziel had never truly left. He existed now as balance itself, neither present nor gone, neither worshipped nor forgotten. Where life grew too arrogant, too close to godhood, his shadow appeared. Where despair sought to birth new idols, a faint flame would flicker in warning. On one distant world, a lone scribe pieced together the fragments of old data crypts, recovered from beneath the ashes of the imperial palace. The texts told of the final duel, of how silence met light, and how both fell to save the universe from itself. He named his chronicle the Testament of the Reaver. Its final verse was etched not as warning, but as prayer. The gods are gone, yet the choice remains. To rule or to live, to worship or to understand. Far beyond that world, in the endless dark, something stirred. A shimmer of gold entwined with blue, like twin embers refusing to die. A voice echoed across the silence, not in command, but in remembrance. Balance endures, and somewhere, perhaps beyond even the reach of stars, Raziel turned his gaze once more toward the living, his wings folding like twilight. The age of gods had ended, but the age of meaning had just begun.